Hear the word of God. Silent. Amen. So I love preaching about Jesus. I really like what he's all about. And after watching William play Jesus in the school play, I like preaching about Jesus even more. Because when I imagine Jesus talking now, I can picture Will up there on stage talking. His tie-dye shirt and suspenders. And it's a pretty cool visual, and it's easy for me to connect to. And I love the things that Jesus was talking about. Like love. Jesus talked about love a lot. Loving God. Loving other people. Loving your friends. Loving your enemies. Love. He talks about other stuff too, and all that stuff makes me feel good inside. Like love. And it's always timely. It's always timely. There's never a bad time to talk about love. Love was important 2,000 years ago, and it's just as important today. Love. What the world needs now is love, sweet love. All you need is love. Love makes... You could probably go on and on. Yes. And I love it when Jesus talks about love. You see, I love love. I hate hate. And I know that might seem a little simplistic, but I like clear, easy to understand messages. And I can really get on board with this love, love stuff and hate, hate stuff. And then I read the gospel reading for today. And that's what I said. That's the way I look. Jesus really throws us for a loop. Jesus is trying to explain the cost of true discipleship to his followers. You see, Jesus is on the move again, and continuing the story in Luke. But he's on the move again, and he had just left the Pharisee's house, and he's heading toward Jerusalem. And he knows that this is going to be his last journey. He knows this is it. This is the last leg on his love tour. And there's a sense of urgency. There is a sense of seriousness. And there's a tone that we really aren't used to. So let's take a look at the passage. This is from Luke chapter 14, verses 25 through 33. It says, "Now large crowds were traveling with him, and he turned and he said to them, 'Whoever comes to me and does not hate your father and mother, wife and children, brothers and sisters, and yes, even life itself, cannot be my disciple. Whoever does not carry the cross and follow me cannot be my disciple. For which of you, intending to build a tower, does not first sit down and estimate the cost, to see whether he has enough to complete it? Otherwise, when he has laid a foundation and is not able to finish, all who see it will begin to ridicule him, saying, "This fellow began to build and was not able to finish." Or what king, going out to war against another king, will not sit down first and consider whether he is able with 10,000 to oppose the one who comes against him with 20,000? If he cannot, Then while the other is still far away, he sends a delegation and asks for terms of peace. So therefore, none of you can become my disciple if you do not give up all your possessions. So, this doesn't sound like the Jesus that I like to preach about. So the question is, what is he trying to say? What point is he trying to make? It almost sounds as if Jesus is trying to stop people from following him. I mean, have you ever heard Jesus be so negative? In these few verses I counted, he used the word not 10 times. He used the word not 10 times, and 3 of those are with the phrase, cannot be my disciple. Jesus he's seen the crowds. He's seen the crowds grow. He's seen the people gather behind him, and he knows that some of these people are only tagging along to see maybe another miracle. Especially if that miracle involves getting a free lunch. And some of them are only there because they're caught up in this mob mentality that kind of had begun to develop around Jesus and his disciples. And so he turns to the crowd and he basically tells them, unless you're serious about following me, you might as well go home. But Jesus is not. He is not trying to get rid of his followers. He just wants them, and he wants us to know that exactly what is involved in being a true disciple. We need to know what we're getting into when we say we want to follow Jesus. Because the cost is high. The cost is high. And I really think that Jesus was trying to make a point with his strong words. He's using hyperbole, an exaggeration for effect. It's one of my favorite figurative languages. I can remember sitting in Mrs. Peterson's class in 7th grade. She had posters of all the figurative language, and there was one that said hyperbole, and I could not figure out what hyperbole was. Then I realized it's hyperbole. Because I started sitting in the front row. That's a callback from last week's. Hyperbole is an exaggeration for an effect. And I think that's what Jesus was doing. He needed to grab the crowd's attention. So he did. He grabs the crowd's attention to let them know that this is not a little thing. This isn't just a passing fad. This is serious. And so he uses language that he typically doesn't use to make his point. And I can only imagine that the crowd was kind of shocked. Kind of shocked into attention. Shocked into getting serious real quick. And I sometimes use that technique at school. I try to grab my students' attention. I try to get them serious. But mostly, when I do that, I'm trying to get them to start thinking. I'm trying to get them thinking. Now you can bet that the crowd, when Jesus started off talking like that, started thinking. They started thinking, and I'm sure they were asking themselves all sorts of questions. Is he mean? He wants me to hate? How can I hate my family? But he always preaches about love. And family is important. Surely he doesn't actually mean hate. He got me thinking. Thinking's good. I think Jesus is a kind of teacher that wants us to struggle with our thoughts, our beliefs. He wants us to be able to think and work things out on our own. And then Jesus must have looked out in the crowd and seen their faces and watched their faces turn from happy and excited to somber and sad and worried as his words began to sink in. And I think that whenever Jesus found that his words were too hard for people, he turned to one of his other favorite teaching strategies, and he would tell stories. He would tell parables. So he shocked them into paying attention. Shocked them into understanding the seriousness of the situation. And then he got them thinking. And then he helped them understand by telling a story. And he told a story. He said, if you were building a tower, wouldn't you first sit down and figure out if you could afford it? Wouldn't you first sit down and figure out if you could actually do it before you started doing it? He said you wouldn't want to become a fool because you failed to plan your project well. And if you were a king going into battle, wouldn't you first sit down and figure out if your army was strong enough to defeat the enemy? There are some things with these little parables that we might miss. We might gloss over if we go too quickly. You see, first Jesus tells us that the process of building a tower or going into a battle, it all starts with sitting down and thinking. Counting the cost. And that requires some thoughtful pondering before any action can take place. In the same way, we can't just follow Jesus with any old way that suits us. We have to carefully consider the commitment that we are making. Now, Jesus also, with these stories, he focuses on the outcome. This indicates that there is an end point in mind. Some goal to be reached. You don't start building a tower unless you plan on finishing. You don't head into battle unless you think you can overcome the enemy and win. You don't follow Jesus unless you want your life changed forever. There's an end. There's a goal. And finally, Jesus indicates that the cost is too high for the resources that are available to us. No matter what kind of finagling you do with the numbers, no matter what assets you think you have, no matter how prepared you think you are, when it comes to following Jesus, you don't have enough to pay the cost on your own. Your resources are not sufficient. You can't afford it. In other words, what he's saying is, you can't do it alone. You can't do it alone. We don't have the resources. We don't have the means. But the key here is that you don't have to do it alone. And I think of that in two ways. I think of that as we don't have to do it alone because God is with us. But I also think he means that we are together. Downstairs, like I said, in the children's church, we've been talking about friends and family the last few weeks. And I think he means that too. We are together. We do have one another. Because we can't do it alone. And we also have God. And he will stay with us. He will stay with us even when it gets hard. And this isn't a one time and you're done kind of thing either. It's an ongoing, day by day, moment by moment surrender to God's grace and mercy. So what Jesus is telling the crowd is that it all boils down to this. Go all in, he tells the crowd. Go all in or go home. Don't hold anything back. Not if you want to be a disciple of Jesus Christ. Because there's no way to sort of take up your cross. You can't sort of take up your cross. There's no way to follow Jesus on your own terms or when it is convenient to you. So not only must we be willing to put Jesus ahead of all our other priorities, he raises the price of discipleship at the end. He says, at the very beginning, he says, whoever does not carry the cross and follow me cannot be my disciple. Now when I read that, I realized at this point, his own cross hadn't happened yet. His original listeners would not have been aware, as we are, of what's going to happen, of the connection between this and the suffering that Jesus would soon face at his own crucifixion. The cross part hasn't even happened yet. And here is Jesus referencing it. Now to them, taking up one's cross was like a general expression of accepting a burden of great suffering. Suffering that for them could even end in death, especially in the historical context. If following Jesus meant taking up a cross, it meant staying loyal to him through certain suffering, maybe even to death. This all seems extreme. It seems extreme to us. This all seems like too high of a cost. But think of it this way. What's the cost of not following Jesus? Yes, it is hard to commit yourself. It is hard to commit yourself to Jesus. It's hard to go all in for Jesus. But it's much harder and much worse to not. The question you have to ask yourself is it worth it? Is it worth it? Is it worth it to have everlasting peace and a life full of love and a life where you receive His grace and His mercy? Is it worth it? And I think it is. But it's not easy. It's not easy. And Jesus is saying that it is hard. And He's using these extreme examples in this hyperbole so that we understand that it is hard. He wanted to grab people's attention and help them realize that this is a serious commitment. He wanted them to realize that they are going to face serious consequences. And for His followers at that time, it meant external forces. They had to deal with the Romans who were brutal. They had to deal with the Pharisees who were desperately trying to maintain that control and that power. And for a lot of Christians today, a lot of the hardships are internal. I'm talking about the questions that we wrestle within ourselves. Letting go and coming to terms with preconceived notions and ideas that aren't in line with the teaching of Jesus. When we say yes to following Jesus, when we surrender our will to His will, something amazing happens. Bit by bit by bit, we are changed. Each time we keep saying yes, and leave behind everything to follow you, we are reformed. We are transformed. We are becoming more and more Christ-like. We experience that abundant life of God's grace. And we discover that the cost of following Jesus that we thought we couldn't possibly afford is worth it. We discover that it's worth it. Because the price has already been paid. The price has already been paid out of God's deep love for us. And when we give our all to Jesus, we receive so much more. When we decide to follow Jesus, He invites us to change our lives in an ongoing way. And it's real. It's real, and it's serious, and it has consequences, and it does take courage. It takes courage. It takes courage because we now know the stakes. We know the cost. But it's worth it. And we don't come out of habit. We don't come because we want others to see that we are doing the right thing. We don't come to prove ourselves righteous. Because none of us are those things on our own. When we come to be His disciple, we offer our body, our mind, our spirit, our soul. We offer all of those things to the one who saved us. The one who saved you, the one who saved me, the one who rose again from the dead, and the one who will come again to claim us as His own. And Jesus telling us that is not easy. It's not easy, and He's telling us that it is a serious decision. And that it's not a one-time decision, but a whole process. That it's like leaving behind everything that you thought was important and taking up your own cross. He's telling us that we cannot do it alone. But He's also telling us that it is worth it. It is worth it. That you will leave hate behind. And that hate will be replaced with love. A love greater than you can even imagine. A lifetime of love. Now let's all stand.